What is happening, everybody? I hope everyone had a wonderful fourth. I wish everybody had a wonderful holiday. We are tuning back into the Somebody Like You podcast, where today's episode we are talking about stepping into your new self. We're going to learn how to step into your new self, release your old self, how to do all of this stuff. Most importantly, enjoy the journey along the way. I have some exciting news to talk about. I am working with the Nickerson Institute of Integrative Health. I am a student there, and they will be sponsoring the upcoming podcast starting next week, as I will be writing up and doing a whole bunch of really, really cool stuff for them and going through the courses to become the best coach that I can be for all of you. Um, I'm really, really stoked about all of that. That is me stepping into my new self, stepping in and being in service of my best self. Hello, everybody who is joining on the live podcast on Instagram. Welcome to you all. So yeah, that is the good news. I am really, really excited about that. They are amazing people over there. Wendy Nickerson herself is an absolute rock star. I love all of the work she does, and I'm so honored to be a part of all of that. Um, like I said, so this episode is going to be stepping into your new self. And the best part about this episode, it's going to be kind of like life. We're just shooting from the hip. Nothing in detail written out, nothing like, this isn't going to be so much more of a educational podcast, more so than we're in this together. Somebody like you. That's what the podcast is about. So I think a big part stepping into your new self is learning how to release your old self. That can be scary for a lot of us. And I think a lot of us never get there. We think that we have to hang on to our old beliefs, things we were taught when we were kids, things we were taught as we grew up and as we learned. And we forget that there's room for change and growth. Growth is uncomfortable. So the more we ignore and try to avoid that uncomfortability, the more we're going to be stuck in that old version of ourselves. We're continuously growing, right? So, how do you release your old self, release your new self from your old self? I think a big part of that is learning to forgive your old self. We've all done things, said things, thought things that we would probably not want to think, do, or say. Um, and we beat ourselves up over it. I know me, I'm my toughest critic. I know I have beaten myself up over failed relationships, failed goals, failed aspirations, not admirations, but I've beaten myself up over it. And that's okay because I've learned now to forgive that version of myself because that version of myself was doing his best to get here, which is huge. Once you realize that that version of you and this current version of you is doing its absolute best to get to that next stage, it's almost as if everything changes. You start to have a little bit more compassion for this version of yourself where you're looking at it as more of a stepping stone. You're looking at this as more of a learning process opposed to the finished product. Your finished product isn't what you are right now. You're constantly working towards the best version of you. So when you're looking to release that old version of yourself, you have to celebrate that old version of you. You have to sit back and look and be like, damn, they tried their best. Or maybe they didn't try at all because that's what they needed at that point. But when you celebrate that old version of you, that old self, you learn to celebrate your current self. You're going to learn to celebrate your future self. You're going to learn that you are worth celebrating. No matter if you look back at yourself and you think, man, I really wish I did that differently. I really wish I didn't do that. I really wish, I spent more time meditating, exercising, doing all of that. That version of you wasn't ready for that change yet. That version of you was waiting to see just to what point you're going to get to until you're ready to change. So if you're now listening to this and you're like, I am ready to release that old version of me, I'm ready to celebrate that version of me, I'm ready to step into that new self, celebrate that old version of you because that old version of you got you here. Those old relationships that didn't work out got you here. You have to honor that. You have to honor that old version of you. because without them, you are not getting to that next spot. Without them, you don't even know that you are looking to tune into the best version of you. It's so difficult to look back on yourself and celebrate yourself, opposed to looking back and either wishing you were younger, wishing you were still doing those things, or beating yourself up. We have to look back with the intention of looking back, not to relive it. We have to look back with the intention to look back, learn, and grow. So many of us replay the same movies over and over and over again of our lives, revisiting those same painful experiences and even the glorious experiences. Talk about winning states in high school and all those kind of things. Like, the more you revisit them and let that movie constantly take over, you're never growing from them. Doesn't mean you can't look back at them, but look back with the intention of looking back. Like, I'm going to look back and celebrate that version of me that was learning so much, that went through all those heartaches, that went through all that trouble, went through all that, those growth periods. When you're able to do that, you're going to look back and be like, damn, I did it. Or you're going to replay the same movie over and over and over again and relive it. If you're reliving the same stories over and over again, you're not growing from them. You're just putting yourself in the same energetic and vibrational space that you were when you were experiencing them. You're just replaying it and going over it again, right? So honor that version of you. You have to visit and sit with that version of yourself. So if you went through, let's talk about this, right? I'm working with an amazing coaching client, and they went through some really traumatic experiences in their lives. I didn't get a release form or to talk about specifics, so I'm not going to dabble into what they went through and are still recovering from. But something we talk about is, imagine that version of you sitting right next to you, either on your bed, on the couch, wherever it might be, wherever you maybe down by the lake, in a van down by the river. Um, but imagine sitting with that version of yourself and like actually sitting with them. What would you say to that version of you that's struggling, that doesn't feel great about yourself, that's gone through traumatic experiences? You wouldn't sit there and beat them up. You wouldn't sit there and yell at them. You sit there because you know they need some love, compassion, empathy. Sometimes they just need a hug. Put your arm around that version of you and understand that you're able to sit with that version of you and help them heal. Because what I always say is, you are now the version that your past self needed. You have become the version that your past self needed. So if you're looking back and you're sitting with that version of yourself and you start to feel a little bit emotional, right? You know what they went through. No one else knows, right? We all maybe experience similar emotions, but no one knows what you went through and how things affected you. That version of you is right now, that best version of you. I have a wonderful comment from my dear friend Kat. I always try to be the person that my former self needed. How huge is that? Right? She says it makes her a decent counselor, and I know she is a fantastic counselor, right? When you're able to have that separation of yourself and your ego, and then your past versions of yourselves, do you know how much growth that is? To be able to remove yourself from the self. This is gonna be a trippy statement, right? When you're able to remove yourself from the self to help heal the self, that's how you help others. That's how you help yourself. It's huge. That level of separation doesn't come easy. That comes from going through some stuff. That comes from experiencing things that otherwise you may have just tried to shove under a rug, sweep under a rug. People are just shoving things under rugs. So when you take the time to visit and sit with that version of you, you understand not only where they are, but how far you've come. Hopefully, you've been able to have some fun along the way. Hopefully, you've been able to have some laughs. You've been able to appreciate the journey, because what trauma will do to us is change our reality. it will create our reality as if we're not allowed to have fun, we're not allowed to heal, we're not allowed to go through so it has this grip on us. So, I can look back and look at, like, the 8 to 10-year-old version of myself, 8 to 12 maybe, 8 to 11, and look at him and see exactly what he needs. He came from a wonderful, loving family. The family was amazing. Right? So when I look back and I was like, what was his deal? Like, why was he so upset all the time? He was so fortunate enough to come from a place where he felt love, felt compassion, felt empathy, felt kindness, was had both parents in the picture, like a blessing, right? Why did I go through so much when I felt like I shouldn't be? Well, kids are kids and you go through some stuff, right? You go through some traumatic bullying, you go through some traumatic experiences that we all wish we didn't go through. But what do we learn from that? I can sit with that version of me and see exactly what he needs because that version of me has become exactly who he wanted to be. And without going through all of that heartache, torture, emotionally and physically, he doesn't become this. He doesn't become a person on a podcast trying to help other people. Because at that age, I was fortunate enough to know I wanted to help people. So when I visit and sit with him, I already know what he wanted. Now, not all of us feel that. So if you're looking back and you're like, that 8 to 12 or whatever year you're going back to, that inner child years you're visiting, and they didn't have any idea, maybe that's the beauty in it. They didn't have an idea and they were just kind of had that childlike wonder, that childlike adventure of just going through life. Maybe that's what we're missing is we're taught the fastest way to grow your Instagram, the 5 best hacks to do this, the 10 most worn sunglasses of the year 2044. Like we're just in information overload that we forget to sit with the version of ourselves that didn't care. They didn't have this reason to go out and grow a social media following to like your purpose. Like I said, mine was to help people, and I knew that from a young age. How to do that? I'm being blinded by all of these lights that you need to have this amount of followers, you need to make this amount of money, you need to make that old version of me. When I sit with him, he doesn't care about any of that. So when I'd say release that old self, I release the parts that were bullied and felt like they weren't worthy enough. I release the version of me that I'm saying this out loud because, words are vibrations and vibrations are the world or our reality. So I released that version of me that was bullied, didn't feel worthy enough, didn't feel good enough for attention from friends, from girls, from teachers. I released that version of me that acted out for attention just because he thought being like I don't release the goofy version of me from school. Those were the fun parts. We have a wonderful new comment. Boredom is the hardest spot where the best growth comes from. Boredom. What an amazing, what an amazing quote. Um, hold on a second. I have something popping up. Wonderful. So you think boredom, right? That's where the mind goes to tickle itself. Is boredom. It's when you're bored, you're not thinking. When you're constantly thinking and you're meditating and or when you're constantly not when you're meditating, you're still thinking, but you're becoming the observer of the thoughts. Go to boredom and sit there. I think of this even when I'm anxious, right? The reason I'm anxious is because I don't want to be anxious. I'm thinking of anything possible to do to not make me feel this way. And last night, do you ever have like those epiphany moments? And it's like right before you fall asleep, because whether it be the beta, the delta waves, whatever the brain waves are, that you're operating at, it sat there and it was just kind of like, it's okay to feel this because that is what you presently are. So when you're bored, be bored. You're growing in the boredom because you're taking the time to be present. When like we live in this world that we constantly have to be entertained. If a website takes more than 3 seconds to load, we restart our computers and think that something's wrong with it. Take the time to be where you are. Maybe the computer isn't loading because it wants you to take time to be where you are. So back to releasing our old self. What's another way we can do it? You have to, like we talked about, be intentional when you're looking back. You're looking at the same story over and over again. You're experiencing the same things over and over again. So think of it as like a behavioral pattern. If you keep dating the same version of somebody, which means whether it be verbally abusive, physically abusive, gaslighting you, um, I'm just using dating as a it's kind of the first thing that popped in my mind. If you keep dating people that have these same traits, you keep experiencing the same relationship. You keep experiencing the same thing with a different somebody's wearing a different mask. So what would we tell that person? We'll stop dating the person with those traits. Yeah, easy said than done. You have to realize that it's coming within you first. This is really funny. I don't think my mom is trying to actually request to be in my live video, but I'm gonna view the request. And so if you are watching live on this podcast, Moma Bear is trying to it keeps popping it and hitting this. So I'm just gonna say accept, and we're gonna bring her in. Let's see if she does it. This is quickly going off the hinges, and I don't care. Why does it keep popping up? Hello, hello? She has no idea. She has no idea. Hey, Mama Bear, if you're listening to the live podcast or the recording of this podcast, this part you can this is funny. I and then the best part of this is I don't know how to get out of it because I've never gone on Instagram Live before. Oh, no. Oh, no. Well, oh, hey. Everybody, this is Mama Bear.
Hi there. I just walked in the other room and I came back. I wasn't planning on this. I would have fixed
Oh,
my
yeah,
phone.
no, well, your tablet or whatever it might be kept saying, you were requesting to join my live.
Oh, I thought I had to do that just to listen to you. I'm sorry. That's my.
Oh, no, you're wonderful. You're doing wonderful. I was just wondering, like, maybe she has something very important to say on this that she just is like, that's why, like, so I thought you texted me, so I was like trying to look at my phone, but I'm realizing I'm on my phone. So yeah, no.
Oh no, sorry. My most important thing is I love you and continue with your podcast.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I love you too, and I don't know how to get you off of here. So, um,
Don't look at me to try
I
to.
know that's
Hang on.
this is live and unhinged of the Somebody Like You podcast. Maybe you just X out of it and come back. I don't know. And just like that, she is more technologically savvy than I am. So we are back in the saddle of the Somebody Like You podcast. If you were just listening to the recording, and you thought he will probably edit that out, that's where you're wrong. We don't edit the live podcast because that's where the magic happens. So we talked about releasing your old self, how being present, how for being forgiving, celebrating, honoring, all of those things are wonderful ways to release your old self, sit with your old self, and like I said, celebrate, forgive them. But now we want to step into your new self. What does that look like? So let's think about it. What do you vision this self being? This version of you, what do you I'll give you an example for me. This is always weird when I want to tell people what the best version of myself is because that's like a very what feels very personal, but I feel like that's how we all help each other grow. The best version of me I see as obviously helping people, right? The best version of me I see is speaking to groups of people to help them, hosting events for people to have a sense of community where they can talk openly about their grief, their past, their trauma, their panics, their anxieties, their depression, a place where they can feel authentically and safely themselves. I want to curate that into events. I want to have that be places I speak. I want to be a keynote speaker on mental health, on anxiety. I want to speak to schools and students and debunk and demystify the stigma around mental health. I want to be able to talk about it as if it's just another thing. I want to help people understand that you are not a diagnosis. You are experiencing things that make up a diagnosis. My anxiety is a part of me and it makes me who I am. I am not anxious. I am someone who experiences anxiety. The best version of me is going to be a wonderful husband, is currently a wonderful fiance. The best version of me is more conscious about what he eats. He incorporates more fruits and vegetables, less takeout. That's the best version of me, right? Because the best version of me is more, when I say physically fit, it's not to look better. I don't want to look better to like show off. I want to look better because I see the best version of myself in what he looks like. And when he feels good about himself, he acts differently. He's more um outgoing, more open to connect, more vulnerable. It's one of those things. So that version of me eats better. He already exercises, which is awesome. Gets all the heavy lifting, the hard work out of the way. But so it's those kind of things. We're going to talk about how to step into your new self. But first is what do you vision this self being? And like I said, those are without getting specific, as if that wasn't specific enough, right? Um, that's what I feel like I look like, right? My world kind of looks like the impact I have and the positive ripple I have on the world. You also have to look at how are you different than your old self without judging, remember? Without judging your old self and judging your current self, how are you different than your old self? I'm sure you have a few more gray hairs and a sore lower back, right? That's one way we're a little bit different, right? Um, but no, we've grown. If you don't ever take the time to look at how you've grown from your old self to your new self, you're never gonna see the trajectory you're on. And maybe you haven't grown all that much. Realizing that is growth. The perspective of growth comes differently for all of us. Some of us may feel like we've been stuck at the same job for 20 years. Some of us may feel like we've been in the same relationship for too same toxic relationship, or relationship we've been trying to get out of for too long. Realizing that is the first step to stepping into your new self. You just have to realize that this is progress. So, how are you currently different than your old self? It's hard when I don't have a guest on here because I don't have someone to ask that question to. So, I kind of have to be like, hey, listen to me. Listen how I'm so different than my old self. But I have to give examples, right? How am I different from my old self? My perspective is way different. The self deprecating humor is not there anymore. I used to feel I was the funny guy because I loved not only making fun of myself, but making fun of things about myself. That's not me anymore. So I've grown in that way. I respect myself. Doesn't mean I don't have hard days. Doesn't mean, but when I sit there and I'm feeling anxious and I'm feeling like I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy enough or this and that, blah blah blah, I change the way I talk to myself. That's how I'm different than my old self, which means I'm now creating the best version of myself by how I talk to myself now, right? Because the best version of myself doesn't talk to me like I'm a piece of this or I'm an idiot or I'm stupid. He doesn't talk to himself that way. He talks to himself like, You're doing big things, man. What, you don't feel like where you are right now is good enough? Do you know how far you've come? Do you know how many people I actually just said this to my mom the other day, and she quoted a movie. You all got to meet if you're on the live podcast, you got to meet Mama Bear. And if you're wondering why I call her Moma Bear and not Mama Bear, some of you are probably like, "This guy doesn't know that it's Mama Bear." It's because in my phone, it's spelled Momma, bear, and when I ask Siri, or when I talk to Siri and I say it to call her, she doesn't recognize it if I say Mama Bear. So I call her Moma Bear because that's just what it became. Because I wanna be different. No, but that's why I call her Mama Bear. Anyway, but we were talking and she says, "I think the movie is It's a Wonderful Life." Because I said to her, when I feel like I'm not worthy or when I feel like I'm not on pace or I'm not making enough money or I'm not doing any of these things, I ask her or I told her, I was like, "I wish some people, some bros, some frats wish they could see the total amount of beer they've drank, or some people like the amount of cigs you've smoked, or the amount of joints you've smoked, or whatever it might be. Like, there's just you want to see the qualitative or the quantity. I'm sorry, the quantitative value in which you've done something. I say I wish there was I could see whether it be a list or a screenshot or something of the people I've had an impact on, the people I've some way, some shape, some form have helped, even with I mean, the little if I helped a little bit, I want to see that person, right? Because I think that changes the game of how you view yourself and how much I say I've grown. If I could see that list of people and look at like the list of people I've had a positive impact on, whether it be a mindset, I helped them when they're anxious, going through a breakup, going through a tough time, going through whatever it might be. If I could see that, you almost can see the quantitative value and how much you have grown from your past. Like I said, my purpose is to help people, so that's what I would want to see. Um, so if I look back at my old self, I could be like, "Oh wow, in 2006, high school, 2006, I helped or had a positive amount of impact on this people. Well, from 2006 to 2023, I grew and helped X amount of people. Like if it was like 50,000 people, I'd be like, you think you're not growing? Look at that. Like, you know what I mean? So that's something I say when you're trying to step into your new self, look at how different you are than your old self. And whether it be the qualitative, the quantitative, whatever it might be, check that out. And when you're trying to step into it, what steps are you going to take to get to this version of yourself? If you're trying to step into a new version of yourself, release the old version of yourself, what steps are you taking? We talked about like, what do you see this vision of you being? Well, there has to be a path, there has to be a bridge for you to get from point A to point B. And whether you're a sports fan, whether you're a computer coder, whether you're I don't know, whatever it may be, there is clear cut ways to get from point A to point B and whatever it might be. This is no different. So let's stop demystifying this best. When I always say be in service of your best self or your highest self, let's demystify that that is an unattainable thing when we don't actually take the time to figure out how we want to get there. I want to, okay, so I'm going to contradict myself a little bit here. It is unattainable because when you get to the best version of you or what feels to be the best version of you, there's going to be another best version of you, right? You're going to keep chasing this thing. But that doesn't mean there's not stepping stones or you're not laying bricks to get to the next spot. So if you're trying to tap into this, but what steps are you going to take? I'm in the middle of a 7-day mental health challenge. Day one was meditate for 10 to 15 minutes. And that doesn't mean successfully get into a deep meditative state where you successfully block out all thoughts. That's not what that means. The stepping stone to that is to block off 10 to 15 minutes for your mental health because what you're doing is teaching the mind that you take care of it. That is a stepping stone to the best version of yourself. Or at least the best version of myself. Some people are like, I couldn't care less about being mindful. And that's totally cool. We are all on our own journey. I do not judge you. I give you a high five. Keep crushing whatever you keep crushing. But the best version of myself has a healthier mind, is more mindful, is more present. So that's a clear cut way for me to be like, okay, if I just dedicate 10 to 15 minutes to deep breathing, being present, meditating, it can be yoga, whatever it might be for you. That's a clear cut way to start being in service of that best version of you. You have to think about the steps. It just, you're coaching yourself, right? I know I said I'm a mental health coach. So this is what I do professionally, but what I do professionally is help you do this on your own. I help you in live time realize that you want to be, feel, do certain things, certain ways, and we put your tool belt on and we start putting the tools in the tool belt. What I'm doing is not fixing you. You're not fixing you. Because remember, there's this old version of you that has grown. So this version of you right now is going to be the old version of you at some point. You're going to release this version of you at some point on your journey, and you're going to forgive it, you're going to celebrate it, you're going to honor it, and you're going to sit with it. That's huge. What have you learned? What has this version of you, present you, raise your hand, hello. What has this version of you learned from your old self? Because if you do not take this time to understand what you have learned, you will never feel or recognize the progress of the journey. What have I learned? I'm a lot more resilient than I thought. What have I learned? That I'm not full of it when I say I want to help people. What have I learned? I have a gift of perspective, communicating, and insight that I used to be scared of because I felt it was I'm trying to think. I felt it was not cocky, but it was wrong to help other people from a place that felt like it was wisdom. Like I wasn't old enough to have wisdom. I wasn't old enough to be tapped into anything. So it was just kind of like this weird, like, why would I know better than anybody else? Imposter syndrome. You're taught that you have to have so much experience to have wisdom, where I can argue I think kids have the most wisdom ever. There's this insight that they have that it's so pure, it's so untainted, it's so clear. And I feel like the longer you're able to hold on to that, the longer you're in connection to that pureness, that wisdom, all of those things. So those are some things I learned, that stepping into what I feel is wisdom and help and guided intuition. I have a strong intuition. From a young age, Mama Bear always taught me, listen to your gut. If I didn't listen to her from that age, I wouldn't be as in tune with my intuition. I feel like I am in connection. When I have coaching calls, I am in connection with people. So, what have you learned about this version of you and the growth from your old self? And what does this version of you do differently? Because it's one thing to understand and see and recognize those things that are different, but what are you doing differently? What changes are you making? Are you doing the same stuff? Because if you're doing the same stuff, you're going to get the same results. This new version of you, what are they doing differently? It can't be doing the same stuff as your old self because this is the new you. What are you doing differently? Recognize it, appreciate it, grow from that. Use those as those stepping stones to continue that positive momentum. Like I said, we're just shooting from the hip here. Let's check in with ourselves. How are we feeling? Are you seeing that there's this old version of you, this new version of you, everything like that? We're changing every day. I'm different than I was this morning on my run, right? Day 2 of the 7-day mental health challenge was originally it was like 10 to 25 minutes of physical activity, but I've been doing the physical activity, so we put in a little bit extra this morning because the mind needed it. Woke up feeling a little anxious, and that's okay. We're feeling great now. So how do we step into this new you? You have to be in service of that best version of you. We outlined it, right? What's that best version of you doing? You literally have to stop and think. Is this the thing I am doing, the words I am saying, the thoughts I am having? Is this in service of my best self? And you're probably like, Listen, man, this sounds like it's a cult. It sounds like it's this. No, the best version of you doesn't have to believe the things I believe. The best version of you doesn't have to be part of a religion, a spiritual community, and a cult or whatever. Like the best version of you is beautiful because it is so particular to you. So stop and think whatever it is you are doing right now, is that in service of that visualized best version of yourself? And we're going to keep it simple. When you're visualizing this, visualizing that version of you, what does that version of you do? When it wakes up, what are the words that that person says to you? Today is a great day. I'm grateful for waking up. I'm grateful for being able to spend time with the ones I love. I'm grateful for being able to fill my lungs with fresh air. I'm grateful for having the legs to go for a morning walk. I'm grateful. That's how the best version of me talks. It's grateful. I talk to the cells in my body. This morning I literally said, "Hey cells, thank you. Thank you for all of the hard work you do to keep me healthy, to fight off infection, to fight off all of these things." When's the last time we thanked ourselves? Well, I started doing it because I felt like that was the best version of me does that. And I say, "Cells, today we're going to continue doing this. We're going to we're going to continue working. We're going to attract health, wealth, abundance and love." You got to let the cells know, you got to let the mind know what to create. What's the best version of you eat? We talked about one of mine is I have to work on my eating habits. That's okay. The best version of me works on that. Doesn't have to be all at once. We gradually work on that. So what does the best version of you eat? What does the best version of you drink? How much water does the best version of you drink in a day? Get that number and reach it because you know what you're doing? You're being in service of your best self. When you start outlining what the best version of you does and you start doing those, you are becoming the best version of yourself. I mean, that is as clear cut as it is. You might sound like, well, that sounds really simple. It's because the idea of it is so simple. The execution of it is hard work. What does that version of you do for fun? Do you play music? Do you go out with your friends? Do you paint? Do you draw? Do you sing? Do you build stuff? Whatever it might be. What does that version of you do for work? Can you find love and purpose and stuff in the work you currently do? Are you in service of your best self through your work? What time does that best version of you go to bed? Does it go to bed at midnight and wake up at 6? No, probably not. Maybe it does. Not mine. The best version of me is getting ready for bed at 9:30 and lights out in dreamland by 10. Wake up at 7, 7:30. Out running, working out, lifting by 8. Will that change over time? Maybe. When I need more time, I'll do more things. What time do you wake up? Like those kind of things, because this version of you is the version you are stepping into. This takes trust in that intuition we talk about and finding yourself, finding and listening to the best version of you. It takes trust because along the way, you're going to have to sharpen that tool of intuition, that gut feeling. You're going to have to learn how to tune in because that's going to be your North Star. That's going to be your guiding light. When you can start to trust that that best version of you is there and you have a clear way to get there, you have a way to get to that version of you, I'm going to spoil it for you. You're going to get there. And then when you get there, you're going to strive to become the next best version of you. You're going to shed this skin of what is currently your present self. Just like we talked about releasing our old self, stepping into our new self, striving to become our best self. All of those selves are present right now. Present you is all three of those things. Your perspective is what is going to change it. So as I'm stepping into my new and best self and doing things to be in service of my best self, I challenge you to take part in the 7-day mental health challenge. Follow somebody like you underscore mental health on Instagram. somebody like .you on TikTok. Follow along. Do these simple things that take 10 to 15 minutes every day. It's one thing. You don't have to sign up for anything. You don't have to pay money. You don't have to do anything like that. These things are designed to help you. It is up to you to help you, though. Anyone can put all they want in front of you, but it's up to you to make the choices. So if there's a version of you that you need to forgive, forgive them. Version of you that needs celebrating for getting through tough times that you never thought you'd get through, celebrate them. You need to celebrate you. Honor that version of you. The current version of you is envisioning what the best version of you is, how you're different from that old self. When you're sitting back and visiting that old self, you're celebrating, you're hanging out, but you've progressed. You've learned. You do things differently. And right now, take a deep breath and remember you're doing just fine. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. Everything you've done up to this point has gotten you to where you are, and everything you're doing today is going to get you to where you are tomorrow. So, this is the Somebody Like You podcast. I'm so excited to have you here, so excited for you to be on this journey with me. And I am so excited to be joining the Nickerson Institute and be working with them to provide the best coaching services that I possibly can and continue my journey here. So thank you everybody who has tuned in, who has listened, who has gone on this journey with me. I will catch you on the next episode of the Somebody Like You podcast. I'll catch you when I catch you. Talk to you soon. Peace.